And then it's just a matter of following the trail. Troy, he explained cheerfully. How did you find out about the books? I asked. Troy, I've always been 2 steps ahead of you, he chuckled, shaking the decanter of brandy to warm the drink. I know about everything you do. I hate to see that you haven't paid attention to any of the business lessons I taught you so long ago. I know about the ridiculous files you keep on me, my daughter Stacy, and my son-in-law David in your desk drawer. I know about all your business dealings, Troy. He paused to light a smuggled Cuban Cohiba cigar. I continued to wait patiently. All of your business deals, he emphasized, blowing a ring of smoke, including the Soren oil deal you worked on. And as I said, I have access to copies of your books, Troy. It's going to make interesting reading across the country when this story comes out. However, there is an alternative solution, Charles Bachman suggested. If you turn the bank over to me, the actual books will never be reported. There will be no investigation, and you can walk away rather than spend the rest of your life in state prison on embezzlement charges. Why would you want to acquire a failing bank, Mr. Bachman? You buy it, and you'll have to service the accumulated debts? I asked, puzzled as to the reason. Just call me sentimental, Troy. I'm thinking back to when you and Stacy were growing up. How you used to come over and play with her, even when I thought you were going to be my son-in-law instead of David. I'm doing this for old time's sake. You're not tarnishing your mother and father's name. They wouldn't approve of their only child becoming a criminal. As far as I'm concerned, you killed my parents, Mr. Bachman, I interjected angrily. You tried to destroy me and my bank. And after everything you've done to me and my family, you're going to blackmail me into giving you the bank. And what happens to my customers when they can't make their car or house payments? An irritated Charles Bachman replied, the same thing will happen to my clients who fail will happen to everyone else. I'll foreclose on them. I'm in the business of making money, boy. If I told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. In nature, the big ones eat the little ones. That's a lesson neither you nor your father ever understood. I can manage without you, Mr. Bachman. I have a deal ready to go involving Soren's oil reserves. Once the deal is signed, all my financial worries will be over. The money goes back to the bank and no one will ever know. Even if you denounce me, you'll have no way to prove it. Charles Bachman and David Porter laughed in my face. You can't count on Soren's oil stocks, Troy. Unbeknownst to you, I've been buying up every stock that comes on the open market. I now own 63% of the stock, and that number keeps going up. I'll be richer than Bill Gates and Warren Buffett combined before it's over, and you'll be left in the dust, Troy. Checkmate, Troy. I remained silent while he and David enjoyed my obvious torment. He studied my discomfort as I began to search the room for an exit. Any way out? I glanced at the table where an ornate chess set stood ready for play. I remembered all the games I had played with Charles Bachman and lost. I continued to stare intently at the chessboard. Stanton's ebony pieces and their counterparts carved from ivory by a master craftsman many years ago. Now they waited in silence for the game. Charles Bachman followed my gaze, and a smile flashed across his face. You know, Troy, it's been a while since we played chess. Why don't we make a little bet? If I win, David takes over as president of Camden Bank and Trust, and you go to jail. And if I win, suggested I, taking a sip of very expensive brandy. The very idea seemed to be a slap in the face to Charles Bachman. I could see him blushing and struggling to control himself over this ridiculous idea. He narrowed his eyes and said, if you win, you will remain president of Camden Bank and Trust and work for me for the rest of your life and not go to jail. If it weren't for the fact that you've never beaten me at chess, I might have lost on purpose to keep you under control. But I think it would be best if you left this town with your tail between your legs. He hissed angrily at me. He turned away and grabbed a couple of chess pieces, shielding himself from my gaze. He turned to me again and extended both fists at arm's length. There were pawns hidden in his hands. All I had to do was guess correctly, and I would start with white and gain the advantage of the initial move. He continued to wait for me to decide which hand I wanted open. I waited half a minute before I put the palm of my right hand under the left fist of Charles Bachman. A knowingly victorious glint appeared in his eyes as he moved the pawn into my hand. I clenched my hand into a fist, and the pawn remained undisclosed to everyone. Since I know I have a black pawn in my hand, I have chosen your remaining hand. I will start with white. I opened my hand to show the black pawn in my hand. A look of anger and disappointment appeared on Bachman's face, as he had not calculated my trickery. Since I first played with him, I was given the opportunity to choose pawns. Contrary to the law of averages, I always lost. It was only after I had lost heart that I dared to wonder how he had achieved such success. With sleight of hand, he always fielded a choice of 2 black pawns. Even in such a trifle as a game of chess, he sought to gain an advantage. We took our places at the table. Only culture and civilization separated the gladiators from bloodshed. David moved and stood next to his father-in-law, as befitted a loyal vassal. I made an initial pawn move. He immediately responded with a knight move. This assured me that his tendency to rely on his knights in the opening remained, despite the fact that I had not played with him for 6 years. I made a move with the queenside bishop. He brought out his other knight. This confirmed that he intended to outplay his knights. 3 moves later, my knight landed on the queenside bishop pawn. Got it, I announced quietly. He looked puzzled at his predicament. My knight was ready to take either his king or queen's rook next move. Usually the counter move is for the queen to take the threatening knight. In this game, it would not help him. My bishop was ready to take his queen in response to the attack. Another common counterplay was the king move and sacrifice the queenside rook. Here it could not be. Bachman played his usual hard game, protecting the king and depriving him of the possibility of maneuver. He was trapped into accepting the sacrifice of my knight, and yet he was looking for a way out. His eyes roved over every piece on the board. I leaned back in my chair to savor another taste of brandy. You'll have to accept my knight, Charles. This is your only dame. And again he looked at me, not only for having the audacity to capture his queen, but also for having the audacity to address him as an equal and not as my superior. I continued to wait for the inevitable. Finally, in disgust, he moved his queen and took my knight. Without hesitation, I moved my bishop and captured his queen. I held the queen piece in front of him. I just looked at the piece rubbing against the princess's ebony. Funny thing is, in the other game we're playing, you had another queen, but it still didn't help you, I commented. What are you talking about, Troy? Your queen, the spy you launched into my office, Janet Temple. Your secret agent I had to face. I watched as he belatedly tried to bring his royal bishop into action. I began to lay out the following sequence of events. It took me a while to realize who your queen was, I continued. But once I did, she was easy to neutralize. All I had to do was feed her false information, and I knew she would come back to you. I bring out my queen to start fighting as we continue to play. You see, Chuck, there are 2 sets of books. But the fake counterfeit books show that the bank is in trouble. The public books are real and show that the bank is thriving. I baited you into thinking my bank was in trouble because I knew what your natural reaction would be. The big one always eats the little one. Isn't that what you've always said, Chuck? He had a stunned look on his face at the fact that I had used a patronizing nickname and moved my queen diagonally across the board to capture his queen rook. Once again, I was able to calmly say, got it. I've known for almost 2 years that Janet was passing information to you, Chuck. I knew that you forced her into an intimate relationship with me so that I would lower my defenses. I set up several situations where I gave you the right information through Janet. After you were able to thwart my attempts with her information, you trusted her 100%. Then, every once in a while, I would provide her with a legitimate nugget for you to save her. That kept you on the hook. Bachman moved his king from a dangerous position to the next row. I then moved my queen horizontally across the board. And now his queenside rook was also a victim of the game since I had removed it. The queen and both crows are gone. You're not doing too well, Chuck, I remarked. But back to Janet. You relied entirely on her reports, and she relied entirely on the information I gave her. You see, I was constantly updating the false forged books to show the gradual decline in the bank's assets. Janet would check the information on her computer and double check it on mine and then pass it on to you. Janet was never in a position to do a legitimate audit, so I kept passing you false information. It allowed me some respite to repair the initial damage you did. The scary steps I had to take over and over again to build up the necessary margin of safety. I was shelling out every dollar to slip half a point on a stock and then withdraw money from the market and lock in profits. Janet always got the information a little later than she needed to in order to contact you in time, and you had time to squash me like a bug. It must have been frustrating for you to see me slip through your fingers day after day. Of course, for every one of my winnings you erroneously said that I was losing on 4 or 5 other trades a day. You may have checked and verified the daily trading of the stock in question, and the trading activity report seems to confirm Janet's information. He woodenly took my queenside bishop, and I responded by taking one of his knights. He made a move with his remaining knight, trying to put pressure on my king. I started destroying his pawns with my queen. So, as you can see, Chuck, it won't do anything when the state auditor comes on Monday. The real books will be presented, your information will be noted, and there will be an investigation. The only proof you have is a computer printout from Janet Yor and David's second-hand accounts of this information, and Janet herself. There will be no corroborating evidence. The computer from Janet's office and my personal computer are already missing and have been replaced with new ones with only the correct numbers on them. You will never find the hard drives with the erroneous information you relied on. The audit will take about a week, and the final report will exonerate me and my bank. Now my rooks were free, the end of the game was approaching. I took his king bishop. As you can see, Chuck, your plan is going almost as well as your chess game. You underestimated me, and now you're paying the price. His remaining knight has fallen, and Bachman's last major piece besides his king is his queen-side bishop. I moved my king to the dark square. Now his queen bishop would be powerless against my king. With the help of the queen and rook, I began to force his king to retreat. One agonizing move after another, and Bachman would not give way, but I didn't want him to. I wanted his king trapped like a rat, and finally we got it. My next move would checkmate him, and he knew it. His face blazed with anger at the humiliating defeats I had inflicted on him this evening, but there was more to come. So, Chuck, looks like I beat you at chess for the first time. The moral of the story is this: never underestimate the lengths your daughter's horny boyfriend will go to in order to score points with her father, including losing a chess game. I guess I can consider myself lucky I didn't go on a hunting safari in Alaska with you and your drunken friends. The thought of having to hang around you and suck up to you for a week still makes me want to puke to this day. Thank God David had no problem kissing your ass every day. David automatically lunged toward me, wanting to get into a physical confrontation until he saw the anticipation in my eyes. I think he realized that if he and I got into a fight, I wouldn't stop until one of us was either seriously injured or dead. He wasn't ready for that level of action. I stared at him for a while, then insultingly brushed it off as a real threat and continued my dissertation. I know that attaching Janet to me was your idea, Chuck, but which one of you got the idea to put her in my bed? You or David? None of them admitted to it. I guess I'll never know how it happened. Maybe one of you is at fault. Maybe you both independently of each other gave Janet a hint to try to spark a friendship, or maybe Janet did it on her own initiative. What I do know is that I'm being torn apart again by the reminder of the betrayal of a girl I cared about. What a brilliant idea to throw me off balance while you plot to steal my bank from me. Not only would I have to relive the agony, but I would have to experience the humiliation anew every day. So does that piss you off, Chuck? The fact that I live to fight another day. The fact that my very existence reminds you of the sins you committed against my father? Normally, if I pissed you off, that would be cause for concern, because even if I foiled your plan and saved my bank, I could expect you to regroup and launch another attack. But that's where the genius of a queen like Janet comes, and I continue to lecture Bachman as if he couldn't stop hearing about the wreck I'd made for him. I know she also told you about the Sorrento oil reserves that my bank was so counting on to bring it back to the black. Just imagine an oil field estimated at several million barrels that has yet to be developed. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it, Chuck? And it's too good to be true, Chuck. Once again, I fed you false information through Janet. I created Sorrent oil reserves out of thin air, Chuck. You were so eager to believe everything Janet told you that you didn't do your due diligence. Why would I? I certainly wasn't cunning enough to outsmart you. I've never been devious before, and you knew I couldn't dare to make a false move. Therefore, everything I invested in had to be in good faith. Thanks to me, you have seen a vision of the mythical El Dorado. With a startup capital investment of $100 billion, you would make billions of dollars in profits. The fact that you would destroy me was just the cherry on top. You flipped through all the test field reports and engineering reports that promised unquestionable success. All those reports from my desk that Janet stole for your benefit. All those reports from straw figures created by me. They existed only in my imagination and from my hands. But after creating enough papers, I pushed you closer and closer to the edge until you jumped off the cliff voluntarily. In the course of all the international business deals I've had to enter into, I've had ample opportunity to discover enough unethical businessmen who would help me pull a scam on you for a percentage. With their help, I set up a number of shell corporations on shore. Every time you bought Soren stock, your money came back to me. I created a false bidding war that kept the stock rising and caused you to lose your money much faster. All the debts you took on caused the price of Buckman Incorporated stock to fall. So I bought them cheap with your own money. Through a syndicate of holding companies and mutual funds, I now own the majority of your company's stock, Chuck. Charles Bachman's complexion had undergone a remarkable change. Instead of a flushed face of anger, he now had a shocked look on his face as I continued to pound him with the hammer. Within a month, a new board of directors for Buckman Incorporated will be formed. All of them will be selected by me. The first order of business will be to remove you, Chuck, on a vote of no confidence. The second would be to elect me chairman of the board. The third is to change the name of the company to Harrison Williams Incorporated in honor of my father. I realize you'll still be rich because of your holdings, Chuck, but your legacy is gone. And that's what matters to you. The days of you being the benevolent despot of this community are gone. Your lavish estate, the Rolls Royces you and your wife drive, the condos you own, the private jet, all of this titled in the company's name for tax purposes, will belong to me. I will, however, allow you to keep your mistress. Charles visibly cringed at my revelation that I knew about his secret life. David watched stunned as his unbending father-in-law's clay feet appeared. You'll spend the rest of your life complaining about me to the FBI, the SEC, and every other law enforcement agency you can think of, and it won't get your money back. I have covered myself with countless layers of protection and continue to add them. You will grow old and bitterly regret your powerlessness to unravel my affairs. The political influence you once enjoyed will fade, and you will be left all alone screaming in an empty room for revenge. I finished the last drops of brandy. I leaned forward toward Charles Bachman, who is now gulping air like a fish out of water. I moved my queen to the last row. See, Chuck, you've been wrong all along in your analogy of business and nature. It's not the big one that eats the little one. It's the fast one that eats the slow one. I reached up with one finger and slowly ticked at king. Shalmat, I whispered, the etymological Persian term that had morphed over the centuries into checkmate. The king is captured. I left the room without bothering to look at its occupants. The events that followed were dramatic and kept the town abuzz with gossip for months. I did as Charles Bachman and David Porter. Finding themselves out of their comfort zone, they turned on each other, blaming each other for their downfall. Mrs. Bachman divorced her husband after publicly exposing his next mistress and proceeded to beat millions out of him in divorce proceedings. As I suspected, Charles tried to get the authorities to investigate my case, but to no avail. With the loss of his wealth, he also lost political power since no one admired him unless he was backed by money. His mistress left him in search of a better deal, and he himself entered into a series of relationships that continued to send him into a downward financial spiral. It was pathetic to watch him continue to pose as a VIP while he was the laughingstock of the town. The town was shocked when he woke up one morning and learned that he had committed suicide by shooting himself. Only family members were invited to the funeral. Stacy and her sister flew in to attend the funeral and flew back right after it was over. She didn't try to contact me. I knew she blamed me for my father's death. However, David Porter attempted to disrupt the funeral to convince Stacy to stop the divorce proceedings she initiated while in California. After the debacle, he spoke publicly about his relationship with Janet Temple. Yes, my Janet Temple. They went to an undisclosed location. Power is an aphrodisiac, Henry Kissinger once said. I tend to agree with him. 23 months after the successful campaign against Charles Bachman, I was still the lucky recipient of the attention of many beautiful ladies. I was under no false illusions that I had somehow become more handsome, more masculine, or that my personality had undergone a much-needed makeover. No, all I represented was a potential source of endless money, security, and prestige. Was I upset about that? Not at all. I knew what the game was, and so did the ladies. We were satisfying desires for physical connections, and I was damn sure there would be no emotional connection with any of them. I made sure that any financial obligations imposed on me by my lovely ladies were minimal and transient. In my shallow world, that was enough to get by. Still, sometimes deep into the night, I would leave my slumbering partner for the night and spend my time just watching the quiet city courtyard from my third-floor window, still looking for someone to believe in. Standing like a sentry over my moonlit city that was experiencing a renaissance. Taking over Harrison Williams Enterprises, I approached a number of manufacturing companies about moving to Camden to end the city's history of being known as a one-company town. By offering commercial loans at a very low rate and convincing state officials to offer various tax incentives, a large number of companies decided to take advantage of these offers. As a result, the city of Camden experienced a boom. I originally envisioned that Buckman's Financial Plaza would soon resemble what downtown once looked like. A desolate concrete ghost town synonymous with Charles Buckman's failure. But I commissioned a study and concluded that it was prudent to allow Buckman Financial Plaza to continue in business and thrive. People psychologically wanted and needed options. People like Fred Carter, a classmate of mine who ran a Ford dealership. Fred would have resented having to obediently submit to me to run his banking business at Camden Bank and Trust. But if he had been offered to do business with Buckman's Savings and Loans, he would have been as fit as a fiddle. I didn't care which organization got the money as long as it came back to me. Oh, I did indulge my ego. The Camden Country Club has done the unprecedented thing of rescinding a member's expulsion and granting me membership. I guess after it was revealed that Harrison Williams Enterprises was thinking of placing a landfill next to the golf course, I thought my opinion might sway the Harrison Williams board of directors. I seemed to notice a few hostile and annoyed looks every time I came in. Went back to the country club, but as long as they left me alone, I left them alone. However, for the sake of vacuousness, I made sure to encourage minority membership and convert the office into a daycare center as soon as it was remodeled. I also had dinner every night at the club to demonstrate my power. I took advantage of the situation and ensured that Thomas Clark, the country club manager, was given full autonomy to run the club. He listened to my proposal to upgrade the restaurant to a five-star establishment. I now had a place where I could bring my business lunch partners for a nice meal or a round of golf. Or both. One of my fondest memories is playing golf with a woman, the chief operating officer of a corporation I wanted to do business with. She hit her second shot on a par, five dogleg on the 13th hole. Somehow we ended up together in the thicket of the woods and found a new source of entertainment on the golf course. At least I finally got to enjoy the game of golf. I was finally able to grasp a bit of the zen of golf, albeit in a different form than expected. Hey, you enjoy your view of the hole-in-one, and I'll enjoy mine. In fact, the same COO came back for another visit and, oh miracle, hit his shot right back into the same thicket, causing us to have to disappear into the woods again. We were having a leisurely dinner at the clubhouse, enjoying the risky ambiguities involved in playing golf when Stacy showed up. To say I was confused is to say nothing. I realized that the piece of food strum on my fork had fallen off while I was holding the appliance in the air. My companion frowned, interrupting the conversation, and turned to watch a charming woman approaching our table as I put my fork down. She wasn't the only one. The entire dining room fell silent as everyone focused on Stacy. God, I hadn't seen or heard from her since she'd left 2 years ago. And now the weight of the aftermath of what had happened to her father and David was bearing down on me. I mentally prepared myself for a confrontation. I would try to deal with it as best I could. At least I owed it to her. Her attention was directed solely at me as she walked toward me. I don't know if she was intentionally or not ignoring my dinner companion, but Stacy didn't seem interested in the fact that I wasn't alone and that we were in a crowded country club dining room. She was now standing by my chair, towering over me as I prepared myself for the humiliation to come. Then she knelt down beside my chair and said, "Many years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I'm here to correct it if you'll let me. Troy Williams, will you marry me?" You couldn't help but notice the sincerity in her voice or her face. Somehow she was willing to forget how I had destroyed her father, her family's fortune, her husband. All she cared about was that she loved me and was willing to put everything on the line for me. For a moment, I wondered if I could I be as forgiving? Would I be able to let go of the pain and be with the woman I so desperately wanted? Would my ego allow me to counter the betrayal of my revenge with her public subterfuge? Were the ghosts of my parents peering over my shoulder, begging me to let go of my past and connect with the only woman I could truly love? I was well aware of what awaited the unintended audience. Sitting across from me, my dinner companion had a whole range of expressions on her face. There was the shocked, stunned look with which she reacted to Stacy's suggestion. There was the expression of jealous hostility at this breach of etiquette that could only occur between two beautiful women in direct competition, and something hidden in the clinical detachment with which she watched the events unfold. Now I was at the table. Now I felt the pressure that every woman feels when proposing. This is exactly how Stacy must have felt when I stumped her years ago. How could I feel my brain overflowing with all the reasons to say yes and no at the same time? I so desperately wanted my heart to say yes, and my fears wanted me to say no. And I was pressured to answer publicly, just like Stacy had been pressured that fateful night so long ago. No. I wasn't sure I'd actually said it until I saw Stacy's calm expression crumble and tears come to her eyes as she staggered up and, retaining the last vestiges of dignity, walked out of the dining room with her head held proudly high, ignoring all the gawkers. I don't think I've ever hated myself as much as I did in that moment. An excited murmur ran through the room as I quietly signaled manager Thomas Clark to come to my table. "Yes, Mr. Williams," he inquired. "Thomas, I know how impossible it is to keep things private in this age of social media. So I need you to let everyone know how unhappy I will be if I hear a word about this on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or any other site that embarrasses Miss Bachman. I instructed him quietly. I understand, Mr. Williams, and I will take care of it. He walked out from behind his desk and headed straight for Fred Carter's desk. Less than a minute into the conversation, I saw Fred blush and start furiously deleting something from his smartphone. When he finished, Fred looked at me with a concerned expression on his face. Thomas Clark had already left for a neighboring table. After a few minutes, Thomas Clark informed me that if anyone was foolish enough to discuss the event publicly, they risked incurring my wrath. After what I had done to Charles Bachman and David Porter, no one wanted to test my mettle. I turned my attention back to my dinner companion. There was a strange look of bewilderment on her face. Well, I've never had a date like this before. She looked me in the eye. Really? I finished the last of my wine. It happens to me all the time, I explained sharply, hoping this joking reply would hide the emotional cauldron raging inside me as I looked at her again. She jumped me before we even got to the car. When we got to my bed, we had the best night ever. When dawn broke, we sat at the kitchen table, not washing our eyes and tiredly sharing cups of coffee. I think I'll call a cab to take me to the airport so I can leave early for my office. What's your hurry? I asked. I'm in no hurry. I just know when it's time to leave. Last night I was pissed at that woman for disrespecting me and proposing to you in front of me. So I drove you home and shook the shit out of you. But three things make me realize that we can't have a future like this. 1. This woman really loves you enough to make herself do something so public. 2. I could never do that for any man. So whatever we are, this is not a case where I'm willing to go that far for you. I only had to nod in response to her comments as I was in agreement with her. She was fun to be with, but we both knew we weren't right for each other forever. You mentioned three things. What's the third? I asked. Last night, everyone in this room could look at her and tell she was in love with you. I kept looking at you and could tell you were in love with her. In love or in business, don't take on something you can't succeed at. I've already lost that battle. As I weighed her words and considered my next steps, I watched the cab drive away, taking her to the airport. The wait was less than 24 hours. Stacy reappeared at the country club as I dined alone, got down on one knee again, and publicly proposed to me again. I was once again going through a turmoil of conflicting emotions as I was once again put in front of a choice. Somehow I managed to say no again, and again my negative answer caused Stacy the pain of rejection, and she slowly walked away, trying to keep her composure, tears streaming down her face. The room stirred again with excitement, and I called Thomas Clark over and asked him to repeat my favor from the night before. I knew it was impossible to keep people from whispering about the event, but I could still try to limit the damage to local gossip only. On the third night, the dining room was crowded with people waiting for Stacy to arrive. They were not disappointed as she showed up and proposed to me again. Unlike the onlookers, Stacy was disappointed as I again refused to accept her marriage proposal. This time Thomas Clark didn't have to instruct people not to air anything they witnessed. He automatically went into damage control mode. Stacy showed up the next night and left disappointed. And the next night again. And the next. And the next. The event continued every night. A week went by, then a month. And Stacy continued to show up every night to propose to me. I couldn't understand how she managed to endure so much pain and rejection.